Welcome to Deconstructing Digital, the podcast where we deconstruct the opportunities and challenges that the construction and maintenance industry face when digitalising their processes. I'm your host, Amelia Fletcher-Blackburn, and I'm delighted to be joined by Alex Winchester, Strategic Improvement Director from Milestone, as we consider how you turn resistance into results. So before we dive into subject matter, Alex, would you mind introducing yourself?
Certainly. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here, Amelia. I'm delighted to try and see if we can demystify any aspects of it. But I'm Alex Winchester. I work for Milestone Infrastructure, which is part of the M Group, which delivers infrastructure services across the UK. Now, Milestone Infrastructure is focused on the highway maintenance industry, and I've been with them for about 5 years. But I do come from a design consultancy background. I'm not a lifetime contractor, and I've worked mainly overseas. So I have been brought in to bring an alternative perspective to some of the challenges and to see if we can drive that business improvement ever forward.
Excellent. So one of the things that I've observed is when you're starting a digital journey, it's incredibly hard to know where to start. So what have you found are some of the biggest inefficiencies that you're trying to resolve?
The interesting thing is not to try and resolve individual inefficiencies. I think if you look for an inefficiency in any organization, you can find them, and you can become consumed with small details and providing point solutions to individual details. But a whole swathe of point solutions doesn't make a digitalized industry. And I think in many ways, attempts to be digital have created more inefficiencies in the industry than looking holistically at the industry from a business improvement perspective. Because actually, digital technology is not the solution in itself. It helps you achieve the solution that you recognize your business needs. Now, there are some endemic challenges that face the maintenance industry. And one, of course, is future visibility of funding. It is taxpayers that fund most of this work. And if people don't have long-term visibility about what that hard cash situation is going to be, it's very hard to make long-term strategic decisions. So almost by design, it's a very reactive industry. And that's unfortunate because a lot of our clients are actually very enlightened, and we secure very long-term contracts with them. So we can build very strong partnerships with our clients. The key is to use that partnership together with an economic environment that builds confidence so that we can agree an overarching strategy and then work out how to deliver it. Because the biggest inefficiency is that we look from 1 year to the next. We don't look for 10 years. And how can we change the nature of assets within a particular authority area in that period?
Absolutely loved quite a few components of that answer. So I thought what I really was hearing there is long-term and end-to-end process. So how do you work with your customer in order to identify what are those candidates that you can then work together to resolve?
It's a continuous conversation. Again, long-term solutions don't come through short-term meetings, and it is about trust. Because, of course, the industry is built on extended supply chains, and to get the right results, every part of that chain needs to trust the other one. If people worry that a project is not going to turn out as planned, people will hedge against it. And all that hedge builds cost and inefficiency into the system. The approach that we take at Milestone Infrastructure is to be as engaged as possible with our clients at all times, to be open and transparent about the challenges, the types of solutions that are out there, the opportunities to innovate and to invest, but also what it will take to scale innovation, because there are so many great ideas out there. Yeah. You will go to any trade show, you'll see hundreds of people selling fabulous widgets, fabulous ideas, fabulous alternative approaches to project management. But all they're really doing is connecting people and helping that line of communication, because to my mind, it comes back to building that trust in the delivery engine, the trust with the clients that they're going to get value for money. And you have to be able to produce solutions that sweep up all of these people to make a difference. And therefore, Small solutions have their place, but in the long term, that real advantage of that industry transformation has to be something that transforms every part of the industry and every stakeholder in it.
And that, I couldn't agree more about communication. I find that communication is key to building trust. Do you find that digital solutions do have a big part to play to enabling that communication, or is that more of a human touch?
I think digital solutions have a huge part to play there. Not least, we talk often about this fabled one version of the truth. Digital solutions have finally enabled that.
Yeah.
They've also, however, for 20 years confused it. Because previously, when everything was printed on large sheets of paper, that was the version of the truth. And a sheet of paper was wet, signed by people that moved around. The ability to email partial information has, I think, caused a bit of a breakdown in that, although information can flow faster. But now what we see are platforms where there is no need to email information. There is one version of the truth accessible from your desktop, from a mobile device. It's all there, and it is known to be correct and valid. You can see the validation of that. That moves us back to not just where we were 20 years ago, but it embraces the benefit of the speed of digital communication with the confidence that we had when we were looking at traditional old drawings.
Excellent. And that's great that you talk about traditional, because often the construction industry can be known for being quite traditional. How have you tackled resistance to changing what can be known as traditional processes?
Well, I'm going to take a bit of a tangent here, because I don't think the construction industry is actually very traditional. I think that's an outsider perspective. What you need to recognize in construction is that everything you build, 95% of what you build, is a bespoke product. And in that way, you cannot compare it to any other manufacturing environment. There's a lot of work to try and increase modularization, and that is a really positive step forward. But because everything is bespoke, it's very, very difficult to automate every part of that process to make it slick. The future is in planning, because if you can plan what you have to do to a level of detail greater than is traditional, then I think you can automate. And I think that is where the challenge for the next 10 years will come. What we have in construction, therefore, is because we are building bespoke systems with a number of suppliers who have to come in, deliver their work, supply their product on particular days, which will be unique to any particular site. It means we need people in the middle to hold that together. And that, I think, is the traditional element that we haven't yet got the habit of hugely detailed planning so that we can take out the absolute requirement. And it is an absolute requirement to have someone experienced in the middle of the storm directing the process of construction.
I think that's incredibly powerful, is that point of forward planning. Do you find that it will be easier to digitalize that component and therefore be less resistant to change within that space?
I think it would be easy to do, but we're going outside the realm of traditional milestone infrastructure now.
Yeah.
But that is where you have complete control or anything has gone wrong. That is where you are working out what needs to be done. And that is the bit that is ripe for digitization. But contractually and traditionally, people don't expect that level of detail to be required yet. And that, I think, is where things need to change.
And do you think, we say that's where parts need to change, do you think there's been a change in expectation throughout the entire life cycle of a construction project? So whether that be the end customer, the people in the middle, the subcontractors, and the people that are responsible for the overarching delivery, do you think there's been a shift change in expectations and therefore what you need to produce at each different stage?
I don't think there has been a radical shift. I think, the phases of design are quite well known, understood and codified, and they are followed roughly in the main. Where there are changes or innovations, people are often talking about trying to accelerate and get work done on the ground first before other plans are finalized. And with the right project, that can be very effective, but it doesn't apply everywhere. And when you are looking at a piece of construction, because everything is bespoke, it's not like ordering a Lego kit. If it was a Lego kit, you could put it together easily. Lego gets assembled. If you follow the instructions, you can build something magnificent. But we are also not just looking to assemble one person's product, like high-rise building in a box or motorway in a box, because we also have to go out to tender. We have to look for better ideas, how to make it more efficient. And this also mitigates against adopting a standard. And the need to go out to tender means that you have to consider standards, even if they existed, even if we had these solutions in a box, different providers would have different ones. How would they integrate with the surrounding infrastructure? How would they integrate with the rest of the supply chain? There are big fundamental issues to consider, and you can't do it just by asking people to be faster and more modular.
So it's not a change in what we're expected to do at each stage. It's how efficiently we can do that, where digital tools can come in to improve the quality and speed by which we can produce it.
That's absolutely right. What digital tools are fantastic at now is capturing detail. There is no need to interpret detail. So you can capture every last bit of information from 3D models of your finished product to indeed individual specifications for each part of that product can be captured in a model. Where I think work will be required is in that interface between design and construction, because quite often we come back to trust and who owns the risk. Often a design will focus on the finished product, but not how to go and construct it. If we're going to do a plan to make sure a project is delivered on time and on budget, we have to make sure that the detail of that construction process comes in to the same, if not a greater level of detail and challenge than the long-term vision of what is required to be built.
So we spent quite a bit of time talking about how you overcome resistance through forward planning, looking at the parts of the process that you can potentially digitalize more efficiently, getting that detail and utilizing that to benefit you in the long term. Have you found that there can be a resistance to change when it comes to being on site particularly? And if so, how have you found that you've overcome that?
There is always a resistance to change. I talk about change all the time, but yes, I can get grumpy if I have to change my habits. And,
So do I.
So I think that just means we're dealing with humans. It doesn't mean that there's anything special about construction. To me, it comes back to my earlier point that it's a very human profession.
Yeah.
And therefore, you have to focus more on the influencing than in industries that are already more compartmentalized. So the trick here is to engage. Don't believe that the rightness of your solution will be apparent to everyone immediately. Yeah. You have to take the time to help people recognize what they're doing. And in construction, if I come back to my earlier point, people are used to firefighting to an extent to say, okay, it's a bit stressful. How can I help push this forward? We have to de-stress them somehow. If you're used to working in a tense fashion, in a tense environment, you have to unlearn some of those behaviors. Building those new habits doesn't come overnight. It also comes back to trust. So the technology can absolutely flow end to end. And you have to look at projects in 3 phases, which will be the design, the construction and commission, and then the maintenance. And what people forget is the maintenance is 95% of that. At the moment, we view each of these 3 as holistic and separate. What technology can do, but yet we're not really embracing as an industry, is have a technology platform that goes the whole way. It's that unifying thread. The information is the same and equally accessible all the way through. When people can see that and they can trust in that technology, then I think they will be able to evolve. The complaints with technology today are often it doesn't do what I want. And that's where you have to be patient. I remember someone years ago, I was talking about building a hospital, and they were being told by a doctor that, yes, you have to have, a door has to be here, you have to have a shelf here. And all he was doing was dictating what his previous office had looked like. It wasn't for any medical capacity. And sometimes, I'd say regularly, for all of us, we're all quite blind to the fact where our habits overcome our logic. And, I have to talk through things sometimes before I get them. Yeah. And it is exactly the same for our people from the executive level down to the operatives on site. They need to understand that the way they've been doing it, they've just become accustomed to it. It does not have to be that way. So you have to open their minds to the opportunity of change and then convince them that the change you're proposing is going to get better results. The key part of this is to show that they will be able to achieve more, because people want a sense of satisfaction. If you can't articulate how they will do better and probably feel better about the work they're doing, you're not going to make anyone change. And it's that communication, the language side, the emotive side, that actually counts for much more than the technology side. Technology can do so much, but we have to build a relationship with it so that people believe and trust that it can deliver.
Absolutely love that. I think there's two threads of that I think are incredibly interesting. One is when we talked at the beginning about inefficiencies, and actually our attempt at digitalizing in some ways has made us more inefficient because of point solutions. That whole concept of planning, building, maintaining, and having that golden thread throughout and that end-to-end process, I think that resonates so well. And that whole point of we have to look at it holistically, because what's the end goal is to have something that we're able to then maintain and support a particular part of infrastructure, I think is excellent. And that second point around how do we get people bought in? I think often that business readiness component can get forgotten. It's the afterthought. We've got the shiny thing, but it doesn't matter if you've got that, if no one wants to embrace it and use it and also understands what it does for them, which I think is that really important point that you mentioned there. How do you build a change culture where that gets embedded to the digital solutions that you're implementing?
As I said before, I think it's all about slowly forming the right habits. And it is about understanding why we're doing something. In milestone infrastructure, we are maintaining and improving highways because we want to make highways safer and greener. That's the purpose.
Yeah.
Pothole road is neither green nor is it safe, as we all know. It seems obvious, but that's the purpose. We're making things safer. We're making things more efficient. We're helping build a more growth-focused economic environment for people who use these assets. We need to tell a story. And I think historically this industry has not been very good at telling stories. And I think the technology industry also has been not very good at telling the story of why. It's been telling the story of why you should buy my product, but not why it is going to change the world, why you are going to be a more empowered individual with this technology in your hands. And that's not a dig. That's just natural commercial imperative. Yeah. But actually, to join forces, I think we need to sketch out that longer term vision and make people recognize where we're going and why there is a benefit for them individually, for the community at large, and for the wider country to have a different approach. People react to stories. When
it comes to telling that story and ensuring that it is something that people can connect with, what do you think are the critical parts of that?
Oh, that's a wide open question. And in many ways, it depends on who you're talking to, because you have to adjust your language so that it is appropriate in the field of reference for the person that you speak to. But that doesn't mean to be patronizing. And I think you need to be giving the same story to everyone. People shouldn't feel that people in an office get a different story from people in a depot, from people on site. It needs to be the same compelling and consistent message. It is an engagement issue. And again, technology is a great engager. Well, for good or for ill, you see what you get on X these days. People are very engaged with it. Maybe there's a lot you wish they wouldn't engage with. But we also need to find a way to build a relationship with technology.
I'm finding quite three common themes that I'm hearing a lot when speaking to customers at the moment are all around carbon. So how do we reduce that? Inefficiency, how do we address that and reduce waste? But also safety. How do we ensure that we're putting people to work safely? So Alex, it's been incredibly interesting going through those key bits of resistance and how you overcome those through effective communication, understanding the value to the individual, and then ultimately how you do get those results by tackling processes, not singularly, but looking at them end to end. And it's evident from everything we've talked about today that you've got a wealth of experience. So for our listeners, if you were to start all over again at the beginning of your career, what's the one piece of information that you wish that you knew when you first started?
That's quite a difficult question. And to be honest, I actually think that I had a real advantage by not knowing stuff. This is going way back, but I actually started as a geotechnical engineer by accident. And a geotechnical engineer is a form of civil engineering, but deals with soil. So most of civil engineers will deal with concrete and steel, but I had to deal with ground, so tunnels, foundations, embankments, dams, all of these things that are made up of the soil. And the fascinating thing about the soil is that if you stand on it here, it will be different from if I walk 10 meters away and stand on it somewhere else. So I grew up thinking that everything was infinitely variable. When I say I grew up in my career. And when I moved from that into project management of sort of metro projects, highway projects, tall building projects, I didn't have a rule book to follow. And I find a lot of people in engineering are very trained in codes of practice. This is how you work with steel. This is how you work with concrete. This is the highway design manual. And I never really read those. So I think not having had a formal process drilled into me helped me be a little more open to change, but also recognizing the advantages that formal training had for my other colleagues who had to focus, I think also allowed me to understand the level of communication necessary to help them recognize the need to evolve. Now, I don't want you to think I'm criticizing the precision and the detail that people follow in their day-to-day work in the world of civil engineering, because it is a safety-critical industry. And deviating from agreed practices, it results in a more dangerous environment. More dangerous environments result in people getting hurt and injured. And through my career, I've seen that too much. So I'm not advocating that, but I think what I would advocate is the benefit of thinking without constraints occasionally.
And that's excellent and really plays nicely into what we've been discussing today with regards to taking resistance to results is about having a changed mindset.
So I just want to say a huge thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another insightful episode on Deconstructing Digital. If you haven't already, please click subscribe to keep updated on all the latest news and episodes. Look forward to seeing you on the next one.